Welcome to Conquer Your Chaos, Simple Strategies for Healthy Living. My name is Jennifer Shlomovich, and I'm a certified coach. And today I have a special guest with me, Jeanie Conti, who's a fellow coach and vegan. In her coaching practice, she helps perfectionists, people pleasers, and overcommitters learn to set boundaries and advocate for themselves. Today, we are going to get to know her a little bit more and hear how she navigates being a vegan in a non-vegan household. Welcome, Jeanie, and thank you for taking time out of your busy schedule to be with us today.
I'm excited to be here.
I'm excited to have you, and you're my first guest, so thank you.
I know you mentioned that, and I'm so happy for you.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you for being my first guest.
I feel so honored.
Well, I'm honored to have you here today. So can you tell us first a little bit about your business and how you got started?
Sure. So obviously, but for those who are listening, the very nature of coaching is a collaborative or synergistic relationship between coach and client, where the client gets help to identify what they truly want, why they want it, and how to clear out or manage some of those blocks that keep them from seeing all the opportunities and possibilities around them. So I specifically work with people who perpetually put everyone else's stuff before their own because they think it's the right thing to do. And then they themselves never feel prioritized. So the most obvious examples of that is in the workplace when, someone becomes a yes man or a yes woman, and they just want to take on everything that comes their way because they believe that makes them be valued by others. Another way that shows up a lot is if you're the domestic partner in the relationship or in your household. And so you're continuously putting the needs of your partner or your children or whomever ahead of yourself because you just feel like it's the easiest thing to do. It keeps the peace, let me do this thing. But I also have clients who are in their 20s and they're working to identify what do they want when it's not governed by what their parents want for them or for their lives. And I even have a 12-year-old client who's working to understand who is he outside of the life choices of his parents. So kind of runs a big gamut, but essentially I help people to really identify where they need to set boundaries in their life and how to advocate for themselves so that they can live in an authentic way and feel truly fulfilled in their lives.
That is all stuff that's very close to my heart. And as we've talked about before, like there's a lot of things that I also do in my work that's similar to yours, but also just my own experiences with that. I wish that I was at the age of 12 had a coach helping me figure out who I was. Outside of my parents, because I didn't start challenging that stuff until probably like the age of 29, 30. So
right.
And we don't realize how much of our childhood experiences shapes our identity, because it's like a lot of us are like, oh, I don't want to be like my parents, or I don't want to be like that. And then so much of it still infiltrates into our being. Like we're afraid to be our authentic selves because we're afraid of disappointing other people, or what are other people going to think of us? And all of that stuff comes from those messages that we had growing up as children.
Oh, absolutely. And I think that you touched on something big there when you said identity, because I feel like a lot of work that ends up happening in my sessions is identity work. Because people do sort of lose sight of their identity when they become a people pleaser or a perfectionist, or, someone who overcommits or codependent. Their identity becomes built in, this is who I am, this is how I show up, and I don't want to break outside of that because that's what keeps me safe. So absolutely. I think you touched on something really big there.
Yeah. And what you said about staying safe, because you don't feel safe. It's scary. It feels weird in the beginning when you start acting differently from the way people expect you to.
Oh, absolutely.
And what you said about boundaries, like that used to be something that I used to struggle with in the beginning. And what I've noticed is it's gotten easier for me to set boundaries with other people, but I'm learning to set boundaries with myself more, which is like a whole other level of boundary setting. because it's like, for example, like working out or eating a certain way, and you know, it's it's so much easier to let yourself down than to let other people down. And there's even though I've done a lot of work in that area, I feel like that's the most challenging part. Is it's still easy to let myself down. So it's trying is really working on establishing those boundaries with myself. And that's an area of boundaries you don't hear a lot of talk about, is the self boundaries.
Yes, absolutely. And that's where that self advocacy comes in. On my site, I put that I'm a personal development coach. I would say that, it would probably be more accurately stated that I'm a self advocacy coach. And,
I love that.
you asked earlier, how did I get into this? And, for me, I had my own journey of codependency and therapy. And I
Mhm.
continuously found myself in this, like, okay, now what state, like, I've identified some of the reasons why I am the way I am or why I'm making these decisions. I've worked on some things and healed them. But now what? Like, now, how do I move forward? And in my previous career, I did wardrobe. And
Oh,
when
wow.
I decided to make a career change, I was like, do I go back and get my master's in psychology and work as a therapist? Or do I go towards life coaching? And that decision didn't take very long for me to make, because I absolutely love working with people when they're in that thriving state. I love
Hmm.
meeting people at that now what phase and kind of identifying, okay, well, now that you've worked on some of that and healed some of that, then now what is that self advocacy? And then now what is getting really clear on what do you want? What are your values truly? And, being on the leg of someone's journey when they are making these grand changes in their life and thriving is just the most rewarding experience that I have as a coach.
I agree with you 100%. And that's a big part of what got me into coaching. Also, I have worked in TV for a really long time, and have been working and transitioning into coaching and doing it part time. And what started it as part of my work and my job, I used to have to do career fairs at the local colleges. And I really loved speaking to students, because you go to college for 4 years and then all of a sudden you're about to graduate. And then there's the now what do I do with my life part
Mm-hmm.
that a lot of students had. And so it was really rewarding to do that work with students, um, giving them some that it was like I was doing coaching before I really realized I was doing coaching or got trained in it, and just sharing the things that I wish someone had told me when I graduated college, because there's a lot of things you don't realize about
Yeah.
life in general. And so that's been a big part of it. And I do mentor college students with a local college still, and I really love doing that, because again, there's that now what. And the other piece of that also is there's a lot of training about doing a resume and doing interviews, but if you're not confident being yourself, you're not going to be able to show up in the interview confidently. And if you have that people pleaser mentality, there's going to be that, well, who do I need to be to get this job? And that's going to come across as a certain neediness, and you're not going to show up as your authentic self, which is going to make you more nervous, because you're trying to fit yourself into some place instead of just naturally being you.
Well, yeah. And even if you do land that job, then you're continuously in pursuit of being the expectation of who you are rather than who
Right.
you are.
Right, which is a lot of pressure. So yeah, it sounds like you're doing some really great work and helping your clients really tap into their authentic self and being okay showing up being who they are. And that's really impressive about the 12-year-old client.
Yeah, he's a fun one. When I was asked to coach him, I was like, we'll see how it goes, and I kind of did like a very short-term contract with him to begin with because I
Mm-hmm.
wasn't sure how it would go. And it's really incredible working with him and helping him, I watch him as his emotional intelligence develops, and that's really cool. It's very rewarding. And I'm with you. I wish that I could have had someone when I was 12, when I was in my early 20s, even in my early 30s, somebody that to help me kind of go through to navigate those times. But these kids are lucky.
They definitely are. And I just wanted to also follow up on the other thing that you said about coaching. It does. I've had therapy too throughout my life during different phases, and coaching helped create something additional to that. And therapy is a great thing on its own. It does focus on specific areas in your life, but coaching, I feel like it opens up new possibilities. It's the what next to do with your life after you've worked through that healing of those other things that you need to do. And when I went to coaching school, when we went to the same program, IPEC, when I went there, my intention was just to change my career. And what happened was I ended up changing more of myself along the way. It was like all of a sudden, all these like Pandora's boxes got opened up, like, oh my God, what's going on here? I still have to work on this. And it just made me see myself differently and my life differently, and has helped me make much more confident choices in being myself that I feel like other self-help work that I've done hasn't done for me. I mean, it's helped, those things have helped in different areas, but coaching takes it all to a different level.
Right. 100%.
So, great. So I have some other questions here. So what inspired you to be a coach? I mean, you shared a little bit about that. Was there anything else that you would like to touch on with what's inspired you?
I would say that I just kind of always, like you had mentioned, that you were always coaching before you even became a coach. And I would say that that same is true for me in my life. I was always coaching in some way, shape, or form, even when I was young, like a young kid. And so I think that the inspiration really was just the transition and the life change. I think that the desire was always there. I just needed it to be presented to me in a way of like, oh, this is what this looks like. And then whenever I experienced coaching myself from the client side, it was very clear to me that this was the direction I wanted to go in.
Great. Yeah, it's interesting when you experience both sides, and part of that training is when you experience coaching, you know how to help your clients as a coach because you know what magical things it's done for you in the process.
Absolutely.
So let's switch gears a little bit. So you and I have something in common where we are also the only vegans in the household.
Yep.
So what can you tell me about that?
So do you want to know like the challenges? Do you want to know why I chose to become vegan? What specifically?
Oh, so yeah. So why did you choose to become vegan first to get started on that?
Well, I think that, the first time I made the choice to go vegetarian, I was 15 years old and I was working on my uncle's cattle ranch. And for what it's worth, like his ranch was amazing. I mean, these animals were treated like pets. It did not look anything like a factory farming situation. I mean, of course they're captive. So to a lot of vegans, that's it's against veganism. However, in this situation, this was in the early 90s. And I was just like, I loved these animals. I would work with them every day. I worked on this cattle ranch. And then when the first cows were gone for slaughter, I kind of made the connection between what's on my plate and like who I'm working with. Yeah. So, these were pets essentially. And they weren't to my uncle, obviously, but they had kind of become that to me. So that was my first like dip my toes in the water of vegetarianism, but life went on and I eventually started eating meat again. My mom, I was vegetarian, not vegan. And my mom was like, Jeannie, you cannot live on mashed potatoes and macaroni and cheese. And I took that as a very strong dare for a long time. But then when I became vegan, honestly, it was forks over knives. So I think that was the very first documentary I watched about veganism. And then there was just like the onslaught of documentaries that started coming out after Forks Over Knives. And there was just so much information. And then I would start doing my own research. And I was like, wow, there's just so much information out there to help you understand just the impacts that an animal diet has on your body and the impacts that animal diets have on the environment. And so it just kind of like, that's really what made me switch. And it wasn't like overnight, it was years of a journey to take a little bit more out of my diet until I was like, okay, I don't even really desire animal products anymore.
Yeah, that's exactly how it was for me also. It was a process. And I think that's a misconception that a lot of people have when it comes to changing any eating lifestyle. Even if you don't want to become vegan, but you just want to eat healthier in some other way, if you don't do it gradually, it can just, if you just go cold turkey, it can be very overwhelming and totally sabotage any success. So just taking something small and trying it out. So I also was like vegetarian on and off for a bit. For me, it was also, it started off as health reasons. And I noticed that dairy, I didn't like how I felt with dairy. It was making my skin break out all of a sudden. And I just started to experiment a little bit more with taking it out. And there's so many ways now that you don't have to have animal products now, and you don't have to feel deprived taking them out of your diet. But yeah, I would be vegetarian, then I would go back to dairy and meat, and then I would go try vegan for a month, and then I would go back to meat. And I kept listening to my body. I didn't like how I felt after eating the meat. And I started noticing more how certain foods made me feel. And I went vegetarian, and then the last thing to go for me was fish. And I was fine eating fish for a little bit, and then something fully flipped in me where it's like I just couldn't eat anything animal at all. But I listened to my body. I just kind of was my own little guide, did what felt comfortable, tried a little bit here, went back, and then eventually just eased in a way that progressed naturally for me. And then it's been sustainable ever since. So I think that's definitely a key to just any sustainable lifestyle change, is just doing those gradual processes.
Yeah. And then, I haven't tried, obviously I've seen stuff about intuitive eating, and, I haven't really done a lot of research on intuitive eating, but basically what you described sounds very much like you're being in tune with your body, and you're being in tune with what your body is like, I don't want that anymore. And that sounds very intuitive in the way that you approached it, which has been very similar for me as well, which is just kind of like, I'm at that point where I'm just like, ugh, like I can't with fish. It just grosses me out. Eventually the texture just gets to you. And then you start thinking about the overfished oceans and things like that you're like, I can't say that I didn't make this change because I was some big advocate, although that's just kind of a nice byproduct. The advocacy just sort of comes. It didn't start that way. It just kind of comes along with it.
Yeah, it was same way too. Like some people start with the advocacy part of it, and for me, it started with the health part of it, and then the rest of it all flowed together. And I think what's really helped me, especially when I was experimenting with vegan food, is there's just a lot of variety. As long as I don't feel deprived, that's the main thing for me. And I realize there's this whole world of delicious food that's healthier for me, and making healthier versions of comfort food and vegan desserts. And it's like, if you're going to have a dessert, then why not make one that tastes just as good but has better products in it for you?
Right, absolutely. And that's like, you had asked about like my challenges or however you asked the question before, but I would say that was kind of one of the challenges in the beginning, was that there weren't as many options as there are now. It seems like veganism has taken off in a much bigger way. And so there are a ton of options. So if you are someone that's making that choice, it's like you can go get your burger fix if you want to and not introduce animal product into your diet. There's plenty of options. And even with desserts, oh my gosh, I live in Sarasota, and there's a brand called Vegan Love, and they make the absolute best ice cream ever.
Oh,
And
nice.
there's another one that I've seen in Publix called Nadamu. Oh my gosh, it's delicious. And so you're right. Like there's so many options out there that are just delicious and don't really taste any different. And you can choose to just not have meat and dairy.
Yeah, absolutely. And yeah, I was gonna say something else and my brain just left me, but yeah, 100%. There's just so many great brand. Oh, now I remember I was gonna say. The other part I wanted to add to it too is your taste buds change along the way too. Like a lot of people are like, oh, but I need to have cheese. And there are a lot of vegan cheese brands out there, like Daya, for example. And I remember in the beginning, it didn't like it just eating raw, like the plain vegan cheese without cooked in anything, it tasted really weird to me.
Mm-hmm.
But if I mixed it in with like sauce or like pizza or things, it took on the flavors of the other stuff. So I was able to like get used to it. But then eventually, like my taste buds really changed along the way. And you can survive without the dairy, cow milk cheeses out there and still enjoy dairy type foods.
Well, I have to say that vegan cheese is a tough one for me.
Mm-hmm.
So I don't love Daya, but I do love Follow Your Heart and I do love Violife or Violife, however you pronounce it. I do really
Mm-hmm.
like those cheeses. And I agree that they can, I don't know. I'm on the fence about vegan cheeses. I use them and I like them, but they aren't the same texture I find
Right.
as dairy. However, I totally experience that same thing about the taste buds is I feel like when you first switch, your brain expects like the textures of meat and the
Right.
gooiness of cheese and even the saltiness of cheese. Your brain is like, it's a predicting machine. And so then when you start eating new textures, your brain is like, oh, whoa, that is not what we're predicting here. We want
Mm-hmm.
these textures. And the taste buds, it's like just I don't know what it is about eating like over seasoned or whatever animal products, but it's like your taste buds are numb. So when I
Mm-hmm.
finally got to a point where I remember like eating an orange and going, "Oh my god, this is so good." It was like my brain was on fire for the flavors and the complexity of a flavor
Mm-hmm.
of an orange, you know? And then with vegetables, I started getting to the point where it was like, oh my gosh, like even a cooked vegetable cooked right.
Yeah.
Um, the crispiness and the earthiness was just so fresh and I loved it. But at first, I didn't feel that way because I really was like a junk food kind of gal. I loved junk foods. And so I wasn't really about vegetables and fruits. It was kind of like, I mean, okay. But now I feel so differently. I
Yeah.
absolutely love eating and I love eating good, healthy foods. It's exciting to me when you have like a delicious meal that's all vegan and everything tastes really good and it's not vegan substitutes. Not to say that I don't use vegan substitutes, but you just learn to eat differently. You learn to taste differently. I saw this meme that I thought was hilarious and it's a woman and she's got like this kind of like WTF face. And it says,
Mm-hmm.
like, there's 80,000 edible plants in the world, and y'all keep choosing to eat the same 3 dead animals. And I laughed because I'm like, that is so true. It's like when you switch and you start getting away from eating meat and dairy, it's like a
Mm-hmm.
whole new world opens up of food that you can eat that you're like, I felt like I could have died before if I hadn't had these animals in my diet and now I feel differently. Oh, and one other thing that just kind of came to mind is I remember I had this personal trainer and he was looking over my food. He wanted me to record everything I ate and he was like,
Mm-hmm.
"I don't think that you're getting enough protein." So I said, "Okay." And I like logged everything and looked up what my protein was and everything else. And then when I went back the next week, he was like, wow. I mean, he was impressed that I was getting actually more protein than what he was suggesting my minimum was. And
Mhm.
I think that that's a really big one for people. It's kind of a joke in the vegan community of like, where do you get your protein? And the answer is, I get my protein from the same place that your protein gets their protein from, plants.
It's so true. And a few things I have to say about everything you just said is, yeah, you taste vegetables so much more differently. Like I noticed because I had to reduce salt in my diet, and just and at first it was kind of like a little bit of a challenge, but then when I can just roast sweet potatoes and other veggies in the oven, and they just taste delicious to me, just plain.
Mm-hmm.
But even if you want to season them with other things, they just take on a whole different quality of it. And Forks Over Knives is a great documentary, and their website is really great for inspiration on how you can incorporate more plants into your diet. And even if you don't want to eliminate meat altogether, but you just want to have a baseline of more non-processed vegetable foods, that's a great website just to get yourself started in all of that. And and they also have a great magazine. I don't know. Have you checked out the Forks Over Knives magazine?
I didn't know about the magazine. I know they had a cookbook, but I didn't know about the magazine.
It comes out, I think, 4 times a year. So right now they have their latest one is a Forks Over Knives Thanksgiving issue, and it's got like a
Oh.
lot of great. Yeah, I love their magazine, and so that's another thing that's helped me with my journey is buying magazines, going on Pinterest, getting some cookbooks, and just trying different things. And then you realize that, oh yeah, I am actually going to get my protein. I will have enough of the nutrients that I need to have. And that is a huge misconception about protein. I even heard something recently that people are consuming too much protein because they're afraid they're not getting enough. So they're actually over consuming on
Mm-hmm.
protein.
I'm not surprised by that at all.
Yeah, I forgot where I saw that, but I heard that somewhere. So, what's it like being the only vegan in your household? Like, what are some challenges that you have?
So I would say that, last year I had my teen niece, teen nephew, mother in law all living with me. And then
Mhm.
also my husband, who most of last year he actually worked out of town, but he was home on the weekends. And none of them they're not even plant curious. I wouldn't even say vegan or vegetarian. They're not even plant curious. They don't want to see a plant on their plate. If I even served it on a green plate, they'd probably freak out and think that there was like, they would somehow consume vegetables from the plate being green. So that was really hard for me at first because it's difficult. You don't really feel supported in your journey. Um,
Mhm.
and B, it's kind of like, initially it was like madness for me. I was cooking all these different meals because, you know, my mother-in-law, who is a meat and potatoes gal, my husband's a meat and potatoes guy, but she's lactose intolerant, so she can't have any
Mm.
dairy. And then you have the teens who also were raised on junk food. And so they're like, if it's not a burger or chicken tenders or something like that, they're just like, ew, what are you serving me?
Mhm.
Which, although funny enough, I did trick them a few times. I would serve like spaghetti, and then they were like, Aunt Jeanie broke her veganism. And I'm like, joke's on you. This is vegan. But anyway, so that was kind of a challenge. And then I was like, this is insane. I'm not doing this anymore. I'm not cooking 3 different meals. And then I sort of segued into, I would just like make meals, and then I would also make like grilled chicken to go with it for everybody else.
Mhm.
And then when my niece and nephew were reunited and I no longer took care of them, my mother-in-law is now in assisted living, although I am very involved with her care, but she's not under my roof. I'm not cooking dinner for her every night.
Mhm.
I don't cook meat in my house anymore. My husband is more than welcome to eat whatever he wants, but not if he wants to eat a dinner cooked for him. And so convenience really outweighs his desire for meat and potatoes. So now he considers himself a reducitarian because, if he
Mhm.
goes to lunch at work, he can eat whatever he wants. If we go out to dinner, he can order whatever he wants. But it really was a challenge in the beginning, just to juggle what everybody's wants are. And there was a lot of pushback, you know, a lot of my house was very vocal about how they were not cool with my choice to not eat meat because it was inconvenient for them, you know, or perhaps maybe it shed some sort of like, should I be considering what I'm eating? I'm not really sure what it was, but they definitely were not about it. And my mother-in-law would even tell people that I would serve her vegetarian food, which, by the way, never happened. One time I asked her if she wanted to try something I cooked, but she would tell people, Jeanie tries to feed me vegetarian food and it looks like it's been chewed up and spit out. And I'm like, what are you talking about? Like, it's, I'm making normal food here. What are you, I'm not like serving you vegan goulash. Like, what is going on here? So, but you know, I did get a lot of pushback, and that was very, very hard. But I've since, like, over the years, now I cook what I cook.
That's great. Yeah, I have a household where I'm also the only vegan. My husband eats meat. I have a son and 2 stepsons. They're all meat eaters. And it was a challenge in the beginning trying to figure out, how do I make food for myself and everyone else? Because between the picky eating in general, everyone's got their things that they like and don't like. And then I already had, like, when we all moved together and became a blended family, I already had like a menu of like things that I would rotate, but that had to change again. So what I've learned is I'll make a meat main dish for them or something else not vegan, and then I'll make a main dish for myself, and then the side dishes we'll share, because there's a lot of side dishes that are already vegan, like roasted potatoes and other types of things.
Right.
So that's how I've tried to work through that, is by having the side dishes as things that we can share. And then also, like, when holidays come around too, like Thanksgiving's coming up. And one of the things that I do for Thanksgiving is I'll make all the pies, the desserts, the side dishes, all of that vegan. I'll usually make myself like a lentil loaf or something like that. And then I'll make them turkey. Eventually, I would like to have a meat-free household, but
well, I think you'll get to that in the same way I did. I mean, the way that I got there was that people were moving out. Yeah. And when it was just me and my husband left, it was kind of like, okay, this is how this goes. Now, I still do struggle, because when you talked about like how there's a list of picky eaters or whatever, you know, my husband, who loves to claim that he's this adventurous foodie, I have a list in my phone of things that he won't eat. And it's mostly vegetables, and particularly everything in the squash family. If I make squash, I have to like cut out the seeds, but like no pumpkins, no butternut squash. I mean, like anything that falls into the squash family, my husband is like, ew, it's so gross. You know, sweet potatoes he doesn't like. And I'm like, how do you not like a sweet potato? So
sweet potatoes are the best.
I know. So there's so many things, like with him, I still struggle, even though he's willing to eat vegan at home. I still struggle with him because he's such a picky eater. And, you know, and I have things like he has his Parmesan cheese. I have my vegan Parmesan cheese. Like we still, you know, when it comes to garnishy type things, that is what it is. But, you know, I'll make cashew cream sauce and things like that, and he eats it. So, but it's just, it is a battle. It is a battle when you have picky eaters, but I feel that you're going to have that battle regardless of if you eat meat or not.
Definitely. Especially when there's like kids involved and husbands. Right. And my husband teases me. He'll be like, beans again. And it's not like I'm just, the way he makes it sound, it's like I'm serving a dish of plain beans. It's beans with other things with it. You know, I'll make like stews or soups, or my husband likes the homemade, I make these black bean burgers. He likes those a lot. And yesterday I made this lentil chili for dinner, and my son and husband ate that. So once in a while I'll make something and we'll all eat the same meal, but it's rare that we're all eating
Well,
Eating
you know,
the
you
same meal.
mentioned holidays, and I kind of want to touch on that too, because
Mm-hmm.
um, for holidays, we typically host. But
Mm-hmm.
anytime I have gone to a dinner party or anything like that, like especially holiday parties, I bring a dish with me that could stand on its own. So,
Mm-hmm.
you know, it's not just a side dish. I'll bring like a whole casserole or something like that to any kind of holiday parties, potluck. I just bring it. And
Mm-hmm.
that way I know I'm guaranteed to have something to eat. And the reason why I say like it's a dish that can stand on its own is if there's nothing else at the entire party for me to eat, I need to know that this is good enough for me to eat by itself and nothing else. The other thing I will say though is in that situation, it is so important to not bring a dish to a party just for health purposes. If you're bringing
Right.
something vegan to a party where there's meat eaters, I would say make sure it is like something decadent and delicious because you want your, like, I call them carnies, you want your
Mm-hmm.
carny friends to think it's delicious. Um, and then when we host, I cook everything vegan. With that being said, anyone is more than welcome to bring a meat dish as long as
Mm-hmm.
they bring it up to share with the other meat eaters. But I'm not cooking it. Don't expect me to cook it. And that stopped a few years ago.
Mm-hmm.
And so it's funny because we had this like, we had a dinner, the whole family recently, and we were playing. There's like this, it's like conversation starters that I have. And one of the questions was like, what's a favorite family tradition? And one of my stepsons was like, well, prime rib on holidays until Jeannie ruined it. And I was like, no one is stopping you guys from bringing prime rib, but I'm not going to cook it. So
Right.
that's like huge for holidays. But okay, Rabbit and Wolves. I don't know if you've ever seen the Rabbit and Wolves website.
No, I
She
haven't even heard of it.
Oh my gosh. She makes such good food, and
I'm writing this down.
all of her meals are very like rich. She makes a lot of like almost kind of like southern food that's remade, like comfort foods and stuff, done vegan style.
Oh,
Her
wow.
website is an absolute go-to for me around holidays because she always has so many great recipes for the holidays.
That's great. And I'm going to include that in the show notes later. I've never even heard of that.
I'll
So
send
that's
it
a
to you.
great,
Yeah.
awesome. Thanks. Yeah, I'm definitely going to check that out. Yeah, I've done the same thing. So when I go to someone's house for something, I'll bring like a casserole or I'll make something else that I know everyone else will like. And then I also bring a dessert. This way I can have a dessert too, because most likely there isn't going to be dessert I can eat. And everyone eats it all up and everyone's happy and and at least I have food and I'm not feeling left out. And in the beginning, I was afraid about that. Circling back to what we were talking about people pleasing, there was a part of me initially afraid to change the way I eat because I was afraid of how people were going to judge me or that they would be annoyed that I'm eating differently than the way. But I have my sister-in-law before COVID, we used to like go to her house a lot, a couple times a month and for dinner. And she started making some things for me that I would be able to eat. But then sometimes I would bring things. So as long as people know ahead of time, it's really not a big deal. If you say to somebody, hey, just to let you know, I'm vegan, I'm happy to bring something, bring a dish and
Hmm.
a dessert or something to the meal, then that just alleviates the pressure on the host. And then if they offer to make stuff, then that's a nice little bonus too. But it's just to reinstill that it's okay to advocate for yourself and your needs and not have to be who other people want you to be in social settings, especially
Yeah.
when it comes to diet.
Yes. So, you know, what's interesting is that, you know, people always say that, you know, the vegan in the room because they want to tell everybody. And I'm like, is that true? Because that's never been the case for me. I feel
Yeah.
that other people, like if you're just like, oh no, I don't eat that, or oh, I'm vegan or whatever, other people want to start talking about it. Whether either they want to ask questions, they want to talk to
Mm-hmm.
you because they're thinking about it, they want to criticize you, they want to whatever. And I'm like, honestly, I find that most of my friends that are vegan anyway, they don't really want to have a conversation with you about it unless that's something that you want. I don't walk around wanting to talk to everybody about what I eat. And in fact, my friend Michelle, she's one of my best friends. And only recently did she learn I was vegan. And she was like, "How long have you been doing that?" And I was like, "Years." And she was like, "Oh, I had no idea." And I'm like, "It just never came up." I don't walk around being like, "Hello, everyone. I am vegan and I want to tell you all." But you touched on something that's so important. And I would say that this is a big tip for anyone who wants to make this choice, is to remember that, like, if you are planning to go vegan and your family isn't, keep your why in mind. Why are you choosing to go vegan? Because
Yes.
it is imperative to support your own needs. It is so important. If you were diabetic, you wouldn't have no problem being like, "I'm sorry, I can't have the pumpkin pie." If you were gluten free, if you were celiacs or whatever, you wouldn't be like, "Oh, I'm just going to eat this wheat bread sandwich because it's convenient for everyone else." But for whatever
Right.
reason, when it comes to veganism, it's like, "Well, I just don't want to be inconvenient. So I will just. And I think it's just so important to remember, why did you make this choice? Why is this choice important to you? And if you do backslide, or you do decide, "I'm early on in my journey and I'm just like dying to have this cupcake," then don't let that then be, "Okay, I'm no longer vegan." It's like, "Okay, so what?" And I had this boss, and I loved this. She had told me that she had learned about the VB6. I don't remember the guy who started it. I'd have to look it up. But VB6 was vegan before six. And his whole thing was, where people fall off is at dinner, because they like to go out to dinner with their friends or whatever.
Mhm.
But if you can be vegan before 6 p.m., then that's still going to make a big impact on your health and the
Wow. Yeah.
environment, because then you're only eating one non-vegan meal a day, instead of,
Right.
"Well, for breakfast I have my cheesy scrambled eggs and my breakfast sausage, and then for lunch I have my pasta bolognese or my hamburger, or my beef burrito or whatever." And so, I think that it's just so important to remember, why am I making this choice? And that you have to advocate for your choice. It doesn't mean that you have to be, someone who's an activist about it to your whole family, but you have
Right.
to advocate for your choice, and you have to be willing to go, "Sorry that this isn't a choice that you want to make, but I'm not going to listen to you ridicule me," or whatever. "I'm sorry if my decision makes you feel any type of way, but that's kind of on you. This is my decision. It doesn't have to impact you." So I think that is just huge, is to just always keep
Absolutely.
in mind your why.
You're so right. And that's a very important thing to bring up. And I'm really glad you brought that up because, yeah, your why, my why is what really drove me. My mom died from a heart attack 13 years ago. And there's, between heart disease and type 2 diabetes in my family, I knew that if I kept eating a certain way, because I was going to the doctor, getting my, and things were starting to like tiptoe towards
Mhm.
certain directions, that I was like, I'd rather do something about this now before, while I can still reverse it. So that was a big driving why for me, was just wanting to take control of my health now while I still can, while I'm younger, because it gets harder as you get older. And then the more time you let time go by, the more damage you're doing to your body. And then you brought up another important thing too, is the moderation point. It's, as long as you're doing it most of the time, or even if you just want to be vegan like 80% of the time, just for your health, it does impact your health, and it does also help the environment. And if you want to have like a certain cheat time, then there's still benefits in all of that. And now I switched to, for me, I just slipped to having some kind of a vegan junk food, or there's places here in New York um, where you can get a vegan burger out. And so I'll get that as like a treat, but it's not like my everyday food that I'm going to eat. But it's about finding that balance,
Right.
and in finding a way, focusing on your why and what does a balanced, healthy way of eating look like for you, because everyone's needs are different. And so it's about tailoring it for your own specific needs. And I think that's why a lot of these other fad diets fail, because I've done some of them over the years before I was vegan. And it's like you have to eat like this, and it's just trying to fit you in a specific way where it's not sustainable. Where when you're doing a vegan lifestyle, it's a lifestyle change. You're creating a sustainable change for yourself that's gradual. And again, focusing on the why is going to help keep that all together for you.
Right, absolutely.
Awesome. So let me just see, I had some other questions here. I think we covered a lot. Well, what helps you stay in balance? And are there any tips that you would like to share that help you stay in balance with everything that you're juggling? You're juggling, your business and your family and just all these different things. So what helps you stay in balance?
Well, I once heard this was actually in a yoga, it was a yoga video I was doing from Gaia, and the instructor was saying, she was like, balance is not about perfection or stillness, it's about surfing movement. And I think this was particularly, I'm not sure if you're into yoga, but I think this one was particularly in tree pose where you're kind of just like standing on one foot. I'm not an advanced yoga person, so for me, that can still be a challenge. But
I've done tree pose.
Yeah, but so
wobble.
she talked about that, and I was like, wow, that is really big. And so now in my life, when things start to feel a little bit overwhelming or curveballs get thrown my way, which they do multiple times a week, sometimes a day, I just try to always go, okay, I just got to surf this balance surf this movement, sorry, to keep my balance. So that's sort of just like a mantra that I use for myself. Other tips that I would say that I use that I would give to somebody else would be setting solid boundaries. When you have solid boundaries in place with yourself, with your family, with your work, then you don't have so much to balance because these things have boundaries. So you don't have to balance it all. It's not a juggling act. You're not standing on a surfboard trying to keep this balance because the boundaries are there. Another thing is I do try to keep a lot of routines in my day. And this is kind of where I said, like, sometimes curveballs come your way. And so you just got to go with it. But I try to keep a lot of routines in my day and plan my days ahead of time. Like every night before the next day, I kind of look at what my day is going to look like, wrap my head around that. When I get up in the mornings, my morning routine is I do a little bit of writing for like 15 minutes. I do a 30-minute yoga, have coffee with my husband, walk a few miles. And then, I mean, that sounds like a lot, but it's honestly all done within 3 hours. So anyways, but I keep like a lot of routines because of decision fatigue. So if you're deciding, what am I going to do with my day? What am I going to do with my morning? Am I going to do yoga or not? Do I want to get up and have coffee or sleep in? What am I going to wear? All of those little things are tiny decisions. But then when you have a big decision, you're exhausted. So for me, I keep a lot of routines and therefore I don't have decisions to make. I have a lot of boundaries in place. So therefore I have less to balance in those areas. And then the rest of it is just like when things kind of come my way, I just have to approach it with surrender and not try so hard to control. So one of the things I had mentioned earlier, I just kind of touched on it, is that I dealt with my own codependency, and I will give you something to leave in the show notes, which is patterns and characteristics of codependency. And whenever I started I went to Codependence Anonymous, and I went because I don't remember what initially caused me to go. I think it was I was going to Al-Anon. So in a nutshell, my mom was an addict. I ended up in Al-Anon as an adult. And then an Al-Anon is for like loved ones of addicts and alcoholics. So I ended up in Al-Anon as an adult, and then I had learned about Codependence Anonymous. And so I was like, let me just check out these support groups. So I started going, and I learned a lot about like the patterns and characteristics of codependency and how control is a big one. And so not trying to control the outcome of so many things makes you feel so much more in control.
Mm-hmm.
The more you're trying to control, the more opportunity to feel out of control that you have. So I would say that those would probably be the top few for me, is boundaries, routines, and surrender.
Those are all like amazing things to do a whole side episode on themselves, because those are so much to talk about on those things. And those are things that I've been working on more. Surrender is a very powerful thing. And it's not about giving up or like the negative type of surrender people think of. It's just focusing on some of the things you have control over and then letting go of the things that you don't have control over, such as the outcome. I read this summer, I finished reading the book, The Surrender Experiment. Have you read that book?
Ooh, no.
Oh, so good. Oh my God, I can't think of his name now. And he also did another book called The Untethered Soul.
Okay, yes.
Yeah, so oh my God, I can't believe I can't think of his name right now. It's like
Me
right
neither.
on the top. It's like right there, but I can't. But The Surrender Experiment, such a great book. I highly recommend that. I'm going to stick that in the show notes because it really helped me. Like I've been working on that for a while with myself, but it really helped me take that to a whole other level recently in my life. So
Mm-hmm.
surrender is a very powerful thing to get comfortable with, because we exhaust ourselves when we try to control all the outcomes, and that holds us back even more from making decisions. Great. So it's been really great chatting with you on here. And I just wanted to check up, let's see if there was any other books or podcasts or any other resources you would like to share with anyone that have inspired you with your journey.
Boy, there's so many that it's really tough. I would say that, obviously I love Brene Brown. Whenever I'm talking to my husband about Brene Brown, I'm like, she basically wrote the gospel of how to be vulnerable and accept the shame that is in your life, learn to navigate it, whatever. So I love Brene Brown, but I would say that anyone that's gonna fall into what you coach or what I coach, there is this podcast who's another coach. She's not an iPet coach. I forget where she went, but I think Coactive or something. I don't remember. But she's had her podcast, I want to say, has been out like 10 years. It's called The Joy Junkie. And I love her. So her podcast, she's really fun. She gets a little crass, which I kind of appreciate. And
I can too.
But she just really talks about a lot of those same things. She's in the same demographic that we are. She works with people who are people pleasers, codependents, perfectionists, the same demographic. And so I feel like, she has been doing it a long time, and she has a lot of just like really thoughtful perspectives and has a great presentation. So I would say that's a really awesome podcast. And boy, I don't know. There's so many.
I know that's what happens when we spend a lot of time, because we listen to so many different things.
I'm gonna look and see if there's any that come up.
But I really love that. I will definitely check out The Joy Junkie, because I'm always looking for something new to listen to and add to my rotation. And I'll also include that in the show notes as well.
The One You Feed. I like that one a lot.
Okay.
If you haven't listened to that one, The One You Feed, I really like.
Great. Awesome. Well, thank you so much for coming on here and spending your time here, sharing your story and your journey, and sharing all these great tips with other people who are also looking to change the way they eat, especially now during the holidays. It's an even more challenging time. So just showing others what is possible, I think can be helpful. So great. And I'm going to leave Jeannie's information in the show notes below if you want to reach out to her and see what kind of work she does as well.
Well, thank you for having me.
Yeah, it was great having you. I'd love to have you again and talk about other topics sometime.
Absolutely. So anytime.
Talk about that. All right. Take care. Thanks.
Bye.